quite often with a snazzy title. I can't stand those. I took over my year group, and every topic, I had to kind of decode what it was actually about, because it had to have an alliterative but you can see that they've linked something, so the history obviously on the theme of ancient Greeks, and some of the other bits around and about. So looking at the structures of buildings, making a Greek temple, I could see that that'd be a useful way of linking those things together. But they've also separated out some things that you can see in maths. It's just maths, isn't it? It's not a lot you can do with things like that. So they've done exactly that. But there's something I think that still lots of schools are doing that is kind of that common orthodoxy now that I think we can work with to improve. And it's this bit. Firstly, if you're still calling it literacy in your school, please go back and change it to English. I have like a little mission about that. Literacy is such a narrow skill, and it's a really important one, but the subject is much more exciting. So literacy is great as a cross-curricular strand, and if you're in secondary, then I understand that, that tends to be the thing. Literacy across the curriculum is vital, but there should be a broad subject, I think. But this is quite a common framework. So we've got a theme of the Greeks, and so we're going to do some writing about myths and legends, because naturally that's the perfect time to teach it. And it seems like a good thing to do, teach myths and legends. We're going to look at persuasion and formality in our writing. It doesn't really say why that is. And then a poetry focus on sensational. Again, not really sure what the link is there, but they've tried to draw the literacy and the topic together, which makes sense. Except, actually what happens is we have a different conception, I think, to how the children see this. So I think as teachers, we see this. We've got this broad topic, and all these bits slot nicely into place, and we talk about the spiral curriculum quite often, don't we? So it's like building this wall, and we go around and add each new layer, and it's all nicely mortared, and by drawing those links together, it builds a big picture for children. I think the reality is more like this. That actually what we say to them is, look, this term we're doing writing about Greeks, and so there's something that Greeks writing has in common, and everything you learn this term is about writing about Greeks, like the purple bricks here, but don't really make clear to them how these things fit together. So because we've ended up teaching English through themes and curriculum content, which I think is good, we sometimes run the risk of creating this kind of incohesive pattern for children. And we need to be able to find ways of making the cohesion make sense for the things that matter to children. So if we look at this map again, if this half term is about myths and legends, what are the other things we could teach in that half term that gives children a sense of cohesion about the English content? If English is really at the centre of what we're doing, and it should be and must be, then how do we get that progression of learning in English rather than we've got 6 weeks worth of work to do on the Greek, so we'll do a week on a newspaper about something that happened in Greece once, and then we'll do a week writing instructions for how to build a Colosseum. And what the children get is this picture that we learned all about the Greeks. And then we wonder why 6 months later when you say, what are the skills you need for a newspaper, they go, well, I don't know, we've never done newspapers. And you stand there with their books going, we did it, and we did it with me, and it's here. So I do that quite a lot, actually. Yes, you did do it, it's here, in your own handwriting. And it's because I think the children, we talk about these cross-curricular links, and we're very good at cross-curricular. I think sometimes we lose the within the subject links. So actually, if you think about the last unit you taught, perhaps last half-term's work, the links there are probably really clear if you're doing a cross-curricular subject between the different subjects. But could they see the links between the different things they were doing in English? Because I think sometimes that gets lost. So we do a week on newspapers, then a persuasive article, and then a leaflet about something, because we've got to motor through all these genres, because that's what the literacy strategy told us to do. And children aren't building up that circle of bricks to make the next layer. They're just throwing a whole lot of bricks in the box that happen to be labelled Egyptians, or happen to be labelled ancient Greeks in this case, or happen to be labelled Victorian, for example. So we've tried as a school to move towards a model where cross-curricular learning works, but actually that it focuses really on the strands of progression in those core subjects. I've always taught maths discreetly from the topic. I don't know how anybody manages to do that well, and schools do. I've seen it happen where they get amazing results and they say we do everything cross-curricular, and I've never mastered it. I think that might be because I'm a mathematician, so I kind of find it quite hard to see how those things fit together. But we've done a few things this half term. Does anybody still use this? This is the map, the progression map of the blocks for the primary framework. I still don't understand it. I was teaching Key Stage 3 when the new primary frameworks came out. When I moved back to Key Stage 2, I just spent all of my time hearing people say, are we starting block B2 now, or is it C2? And I spent all my time saying, is it the Bs that go all in one row, or do you do the ones first and then... And are you allowed, that's the thing, you see this, on tests, you've probably seen questions, am I allowed to do C2 before B2? And other people going, I don't know, yes, you have to, as long as you've done the 2s before the C, except and this map, I think, was supposed to help. I'm guessing from the fact that most people looked blank at it, that was one of those things that was in the folder that everybody went, turn that over, doesn't work through the things. And that's why we ended up with schools using unit plans that came from the National Numeracy Strategy, because nobody knew what the bloody hell they were supposed to be doing. And I think that's the same for the children, actually. We spend all our time with the children saying we're linking all these things together because it's really important that you get the big picture of stuff. And we're going to do a couple of weeks on counting, and then they go across, don't they, for a term. You do A1, B1, C1, D1, Is that right?
Yes.
So we do a bit of number work, and then we're going to throw in a graph, and then we're going to come back to a bit of number work because we've done a graph now. And calculating, measuring, and understanding shape. I don't really know what that means, but it's different from securing number facts, understanding. Well, what's that? Securing number facts, understanding shape. They're two different things, aren't they? But it's kind of squeezed into a 2-week block, because that's what you've got to do, except you're on a trip on Thursday, so now it's a 9-day block. It's woven tight if you start the next Monday out of sequence with the other. It's just horrendous. And it was hard to plan from, and it was hard for me to get my head round. And this was what made me start thinking, what message is this giving to children about how maths fits together as concepts? What we're telling them is, there are all these different blocks of maths, which we call maths, that we shove in the same cupboard, but there's no link between it. Or, I don't know, were we meant to tell them that we're coming to B2, so think back to what we did in B1? Because that doesn't make sense to me. And we're doing all this target setting. You've got to set targets for everything you do now, haven't you? Children have constantly got to have a target. So you do B1, you secure a bit of number facts, and you've understood some shape, but they're not quite sure about that last bit of shape you did, which happens to be, I don't know, naming 3D shapes. So you set them a target of 3D shape, and then on Monday you start drawing bar graphs. So it's like, well, I've set you a target, because that's what you have to do, and could you just remember that for when we come to B2, which will be the third week of January, because them's the rules. So we've got this horrendous system where the structure of how we're meant to teach doesn't lend itself to children's understanding or to this process we talk about all the time. Feedback is so important, and that cycle of targeting and feedback should be really productive, but we end up writing targets because we've got to, but then moving on to different units. So we've tried a couple of things. If you're familiar with the academy chain in London, even if you hate academies, the stuff they're doing on maths is quite interesting. So at my school, we've moved now to this mastery approach. It's not, we haven't bought into their scheme. I had to start in year 1 and I take to teach year 5. So I wasn't up for waiting for that long. But it meant that in year 5 this year, and our maths was a little bit underachieving, particularly for a leafy primary school in Sussex, we just, for the first half term, just did addition and subtraction. Now I remember, and I feel horrendously guilty about this, I remember proudly saying once, do you know what, the first 2 weeks of this year I'm just going to do calculations because they need it. And that was it, that was in my head, I'm doing the whole 2 weeks on calculations, and that was input. And actually what I did then was move on to all the other units. By spending 6 weeks on addition and subtraction, we started to put that cohesion together. So you can see that we did a bit of shape and space, but we didn't say we're moving on to C3 because it's shape and space. We did perimeter. Because perimeter is essentially just addition and subtraction in a context. So we built on the skills, they've done the kind of calculation work, and now we're applying it in a context where it made sense. We didn't teach area at the same time because they're different. And that really throws kids, isn't it? Those things in the 3 averages is horrendous to teach. But we kept them completely separate, and then we looked at angles in a triangle. Because basically if you can do addition and subtraction, you can work out the missing angle in a triangle, and you can work out the angles on a straight line, and angles around a point, and we spent 6 weeks just doing things into addition and subtraction. And you know, there's kids in my class who do addition and subtraction to death. They're brilliant at it. Probably in a way they never would have been if I'd have done that, oh, I'm doing 2 weeks on calculations, and then we'll come back to it in January and again in May. Because you spend your time, fractions was the worst. Every time you come round to fractions, you think, oh God. They think, oh God. And you start with, let's remember what a fraction is. So this spring term, where all we did was fractions, it scared me. Petrified. Like, I planned this thing. I made year 4 do it as well. And then came to January and chickened out and did properties of shape first because I didn't feel like I was ready for fractions. It was a mistake, I have to say. Year 4 followed it religiously. my other half is ahead of year 4. She did as she was told, and I didn't mention. But they said, you know what, we did division in December, you know, we did fractions in January right through to February. And why would you not do that? It's crazy that that wasn't the obvious thing. I didn't see that even. But all of that progression, the kids felt like they really made progress with fractions. I can honestly say that I think if you ask a year 4 or 5 child in my school what they think about fractions, well, they'll say they love them because we've told them to. But actually, I think they'll say it with a certain amount of honesty that they don't feel horrendous about them, because they had enough time over that period to really make progress with it. By really linking the things together that mattered, that worked. Which made me start to think about how does that work for English, which is harder if you're going to work across the curriculum and it's not so clear. But it has. I've managed this year to find ways to make that cohesion work. So I'm going to try to explain